Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the ICIT 2020 Fall Briefing. We are starting off our briefing with a bang this morning, and we have an exciting day, half day today and half day tomorrow for you. Our session today is Leading Through Crisis, Communication, Collaboration, and Coordination. The unprecedented worldwide crisis has spawned in recent and continuing healthcare challenges, make leading more challenging than ever. Executives face the stress and consequences of a pandemic on top of the tumult of an unsettled marketplace and civil unrest. The concepts and tools of meta leadership help those leaders reframe adversity. The secrets to success are communication, coordination, and collaboration. It is an opportunity for building enduring transformational change. These leaders will share these challenges, successes, and opportunities for improvement as we continue to wade through uncertain waters. And the first person that's going to do that for us is Oki Mek. Oki works for the Department of Health and Human Services as a senior advisor to the HHS Chief Information Officer. He has been in this assignment since August 2019. In his current role, Mr. Mek focuses on initializing and leading change through digital transformation that aims to enhance the health and well-being of all Americans by providing effective health and human services and fostering sound, sustained advances in the sciences underlying medicine, public health, and social services. In this new role, he focuses on strategic analysis, scalability, sustainability, feasibility, and most importantly, marketability. Mr. Mek received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Virginia Tech. He also received an Associate of Applied Science in Military Intelligence, Command Control, and Information Operations at Cochise College. Mr. Mek went to Harvard University, where he received a Master of Liberal Arts in Information Management Systems. I give to you Mr. Oki Mek. Welcome, Oki.
Well, thank you, Joyce. Good morning, everyone. That was quite an intro. Thank you very much. Let me give a little background of myself. Um, um, I've been with HSS for about 10 years. I am currently the lead integrator, technical integrator for Reimagine HSS. Reimagine HSS serve as a R&D function, a 3-year period R&D function that focus on pain points within the agencies and looking at some innovative way how we could support the mission. When I think about R&D, I think about a lot of smart people, a lot of creative people coming up with some great idea, but there is a bit of a disconnect between R&D function and operation and understanding requirements and federal laws and guidelines. And that's where I come in terms of being in that bridge between R&D and operation, because you really have to understand a lot of the requirements around, that FATAR, the FATAR Act that gives authority to OCIO and IT, FISMA Act as well that give authority to cybersecurity. So there's a lot of understanding, a lot of moving parts and variables that go into trying to make that initiative successful. So I serve in that middle ground, trying to help them. Hey, do you have a business plan? Do you have an institutional home? What is your 5-year outlook? What is your 5-year budget plan? So that's the sort of thing that I kind of help with in terms of serving Reimagine HSS. One of the things that I want to focus on today in terms of sharing some of my leadership experience, some of the things that I've learned along the way is my background is cybersecurity, but I always want to learn about other business function within the government. I believe that just understanding cybersecurity alone is not enough to to be a very good cybersecurity professional. You really have to understand the business that you're trying to safeguard. So I wrote an article from an academic perspective. I teach at University of Maryland on innovation in cybersecurity. This is an academic piece on from a teaching perspective, not from HSS perspective. It's called the Art of War. It was published a couple weeks ago on OODA Loop, which is a DoD community. OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's a combat of operation process, way of thinking, and how to engage. It's very good news outlet. I read it every day. So the article focused on the art of war, and I think art of war could be applied to business and the way we live as well. It's written by Sun Tzu, hundred thousands of years ago, but I think it applies today, and a lot of military university are still using that material to as a teaching material for the students. I think it applies today. Also, my just combining that art of war with my lifelong experience working with cybersecurity, I think it kind of go hand in hand. So if you haven't, I hope you could go out and kind of look at the article, and I would love to get feedback so I can continue to learn. But in terms of the article itself, I focus on three areas of the principle of the art of war, as well as some of the principle around war and how you approach war. Um, and I think it applies. So in terms of I believe that IT nowadays is merging closer and closer to the physical realm. Think of IoT devices. Think of, our power plant, our water supply, our transportation, street lights, that's all powered by IT. It's powered by a system called SCADA. It applies to, you can control the physical realm through technology. So it creates a new infrastructure that's both cyber as well as physical. So let's say, if somebody hacked a traffic light system, say in New York or DC, that could create a lot of chaos in terms, hey, what if, they turn all the lights green on an intersection? That could cause a big effect. What if they control our metro system, our train system? So that inevitably, if there's a cyber war, that could bleed into the physical realm. That could have a physical effect. So cyber is paramount in today's war. And with the COVID pandemic, it forces the workforce to uh, to more online. When you think about it, everybody's remote now. Everybody's using either issue devices or devices outside of and their own device in some cases to access the infrastructure. So eventually, that you have this you basically open up a new threat vector into the ecosystem. A good example would be, if you have a building, before you letting people into the front of, the front door, and you kind of vet them through in it. But now, you have to expose yourself to, opening the windows, the back door, the attic, you're kind of letting people in, even though it's control, but it's still you opening up more doors, so to speak. So you created more threat vector into say your building. So that increased the risk. So that's why cyber is so paramount in today's world. Um, even when even if you wanna focus on mission, but you can't you can't execute your mission if your cybersecurity posture is not in place, or it's running into issues, or it's being breached. HSS, of course, is at the center of the COVID pandemic. So we are getting hit hard from cyber
Mm,
penetrations and people trying to probe the environment, trying to see weak spot, and they are using AI to look at how the users are interacting with the infrastructures and the systems. So basically, the art of war is focusing on the three main principles. There are more principles, but I just focus on the three main principles. The first one is really to know yourself and know your enemy. And that's pretty straightforward, really understanding your organization as you look to safeguard from any potential breach and attacks. Knowing the process of your risk management framework process, knowing the people and knowing the technology. And in converse to that, you really have to understand the attacker, the bad actors. What what um, what process are they using to try to attack your system, as well as who are they? Where are they coming from? What what country, or what is their incentive from trying to breach your environment? But also, what technology are they using to try to penetrate your infrastructure? So that's the type of thing that you really have to understand. So from a process perspective, our risk management framework is very antiquated. It's heavily paper based. It's a lot of manual process. As I mentioned earlier, if the attacker are using AI, a very aggressive, a very complex and progressive technology such as AI, and they are attacking on every second, every minute, and trying to probe and trying to to try and identify weak points. If we are not using that type of advanced technology and emerging tech, we are at a disadvantage. So you really have to look at the enemies and what technology and what kind of technique are they using, and you kind of have to look at your own organization technique and technology as well. And that's why I think machine learning is really critical in terms of almost like fighting fire with fire. We can't fight an AI or machine learning with spreadsheet, Word documents. You're going to lose that battle. Really focusing on the speed of how we assess systems and authorize systems in a way that's automated instead of in an antiquated, primitive way. I think that's the key into kind of fighting uh, fighting off or fending off the hackers. Of course, once you start, you could go. Once you could employ machine learning and AI, you could not only do a defensive strategy, but you could go on offensive as well. You could start analyzing the threat patterns as well, similar to what FBI's do with criminals. They profile criminals. We could essentially do the same thing as in terms of profiling the threat patterns and profiling the hackers and bad actors, and we could go on the offensive and start being proactive in a way we are addressing security. The other part to think about is the people, your workforce, in terms of their perspective of cybersecurity. What is their interpretation of cybersecurity? Do they think it's too difficult? Do they think that, hey, um, it's not necessary? You have to really engage, but also gauge their perspective and understand that, hey, are they taking cybersecurity seriously? If not, then then you have an issue, because the biggest risk to your organization in terms of cybersecurity are the workforce that are actually using the systems or in your organization. So you could gauge that by using machine learning to really focus on, hey, people taking shortcuts. People circumventing the cybersecurity framework or the cybersecurity requirements, and then you could identify the issues or the gaps, and then start molding your training and your policy to be more targeted in terms of addressing and trying to improve that process and improve the people's perspective of cybersecurity. So you kind of have to really focus on the workforce and understand the workforce and understand your organization as whole, and also understand your enemy as well to really address and to really have a good strategy on cybersecurity. So that's one of the principles: know yourself and know your enemy. That's going to be critical. The second part is speed and flexibility. As I mentioned earlier, the when you build a system and you want to deploy the system, it takes about 6 months to a year in terms of trying to bring up a new system, going through the authority to operate, because by FISMA law, you have to assess and authorize the system. As you know, things are changing rapidly. The speed of what we're doing in terms of addressing COVID or trying to come up with something to serve the mission. You can't wait 6 months to a year trying to bring a system up or trying to reauthorize a system, because things are changing rapidly, data are changing rapidly, technology moving so rapidly, are changing so rapidly, going to the cloud. People are moving to the cloud. People are going to the COTS product, as software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service in terms of cloud offering. Things are moving so rapidly that speed is so critical in terms of the mission and the speed of IT, the speed of emerging tech, that cybersecurity has to kind of keep up with the mission and the technology, and trying to adapt and be flexible in trying to almost recalibrate as you move into trying to embed cybersecurity into the moving target, basically. So that's why speed and flexibility, adaptability is key when you think about cybersecurity, and basically trying to evolve with what's going on. I think if you don't evolve, you will become obsolete. I think we can't, from a cybersecurity perspective, we can't lag behind. So we kind of have to keep up with the mission and the technology. In terms of, as I always mention, the ATO process, I think it's 6 months to a year. It's unacceptable. I think there's a way to approach it in a way of speeding that up, in essence, to automate that process by getting away paper and the manual efforts. The best model I could think of is almost, as I mentioned, many times, is a TurboTax model of, you think about the evolution of filing taxes. The early days, you file your taxes through paper. It takes a day or two. It takes a week or 2 weeks to do your taxes, because you have to hunt down the paper, you filling in information, and in some cases you're filling the same information over and over again, at different forms. The early 2000, you could do it online, but that still take a couple of days. But nowadays, you could really file your tax using TurboTax in a matter of hours or two, by using machine learning, by using RPA, by using getting away from the paper manual. Not when I say digitizing the data, I'm not saying just having an electronic document. I'm saying really digitize the data. Think about our TurboTax now. Things are being aggregated from different places and putting in there, and then you just basically just answering questions like, hey, What do you want to do this year? What are you filing? What anything have changed from last year? Information from last year is being saved to this year. All you have to do is update. Think about that when you could apply that to cybersecurity. And, what do you want to do? Are you building a new system? Are you making changes to the system? Are you moving from an on-prem to a cloud environment? Are you doing an upgrade? By just by asking a series of questions, you could actually essentially populate that information to different forms. There's about 15 or 20 forms in the system security plan, and I actually did a data map. The information from form to form to form, it's most of them are actually the same information. It's just being copy and paste from one form to the next. So if you could just ask the user, the system owners, or the program folks and say, what are you doing? Describe your system, describe what you want to do, and then populate that information without being uh, almost a slave to data entry. Essentially, you could speed up the process. And another part to that is when you get done with filing taxes, there's at the end they run some kind of machine learning on the entries of you just what you have entered for your tax return, and they give you a confidence score if you're going to get audited or not. That little piece of model could be applied to cybersecurity. When you assess a system for an authority to operate, there's about 500 controls, security controls, 500 to 600 controls. You could actually run machine learning against each requirement. So when a system owner write down the implementation statement, you could actually run machine learning to compare the requirements and supplemental requirements and policies against the implementation statement and give you a score, a confidence score. And if I'm a system owner, if the score is like 20% or 50%, then hey, maybe I didn't read the information well enough. And that would help me trying to go look at it, go look at the requirements again and rewrite what I wrote and supply the necessary document. But from an auditor perspective, an assessment process takes about 2 months. But if the assessor could go in and look at the score and look at the documents and say, hey, this 80% or 100%, then you could essentially just look at it and say, hey, okay, this is good to go. I can move on to the next control. That in essence could actually reduce that process, that 2-month process, down to a week or 2 weeks at most. So that it essentially will automate, so to speak, that process. And that by automating that, you could essentially now combine that to the change management process. And that's essentially remove the necessary of reauthorizing every year. You could actually have a running continuous monitoring, continuous change assessments, continuous authorization and mitigation, and you just keep on going. That in itself is real-time risk management. And then the last principle of order war is simplicity. In war, there's no place for complex instruction. And in some cases, there's in cybersecurity, it's very complex. There's a lot of gray area, but that should not be the case. It should not be convoluted. It should be simple, straightforward. It should be clear to the workforce. It should be clear to the assessor, the auditor. So you're working off the same criteria and requirements, and little less of that that gray area, a little less of that confusion. Simplicity is key, and simplicity also mean that you have to reinforce to make sure that the workforce actually understand. So there's no confusion when there's a breach or when there's a when there's a hack or when there's a situation where you need to move from a production environment to to a backup site, when you have to move from the home office headquarters to an alternative work site. There shouldn't be any confusion. People should be well trained and understand what they need to do, their roles and responsibility to, in a matter of seconds, they can go and say, hey, this is my roles and responsibility. And also you have this document where, if Joe Schmo is not there, that you can hand that document to the next person and say, okay, let's go. Let's hit the ground running, because there's no debate when it comes to when things hit the fan. You kind of have to go. That's why simplicity is key. The workforce, as I mentioned, are the biggest risks to your organization. You need to think about insider threats. And then you have to think about zero trust. So they are the biggest risks, bigger risks than the hackers. So for having them understand the instructions and the requirements and the policy is key in terms of having a good strategy and implementing that strategy in terms of cybersecurity. And those are the three main things, in three main principles I kind of focus on when it comes to cybersecurity, art of war, the principle of war, and leadership in terms applies specifically to cybersecurity. But I think the art of war and the principle of war, you could really apply it to outside of cybersecurity. So it's not confined to just cybersecurity. And I think, and lastly, I think that the point is that if the hackers are using machine learning, we can't use paper. We can't use manual intensive, labor intensive process. We have to fight fire with fire. So we have to use emerging tech against emerging tech to win this war.
Oh, thank you very much, Oki. We appreciate your comments, and I have a couple of questions for you. I think we have about 2 more minutes left. So I know you said machine learning adoption, speed to action, flexibility, and the importance of the workforce, which I think we're going to hear that common theme throughout the entire day. So what advice do you have for C-level executives besides those 3, especially the speed to action? What would you, whether it's corporate or government, what's your advice?
I think with cybersecurity, it has such a big impact into the mission of the organization and the business that you really have to start taking it very seriously. And because the studies have shown that a breach could cost an organization about 18. The average cost of a breach is about 18 million. That's a lot of
Wow.
money in
Wow.
terms of how much that impact it has on your business. So you really have to start taking security seriously, but also you have to start strategically thinking about cybersecurity and integrating it with your business and your process and your culture as well. Because like as I mentioned, the biggest risk into your data, into your organization are the workforce. So you really have to build
Mm-hmm.
that culture, because when you think about it, Joyce, people think, okay, cybersecurity, let the cyber expert take care of it. But no,
Yes.
cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. Every single one in that organization have to understand what is cybersecurity, what are the requirements. I mean, you don't have to go into detail, you don't have to implement it, but you really have to understand clear instructions and kind of build that culture. So I think it's very
Mm-hmm.
critical that the C-suite takes cybersecurity seriously and really think strategically around cyber.
Thank you. I agree with you. So cyber is everybody's business, and it's the business of everybody to know cyber.
Yes, correct.
Well, thank you very much, Oki. This was absolutely great. I appreciate you coming in and kicking us off for this conference. And you have a wonderfully great day. And keep up that work on the art of war. And everybody, please go to LinkedIn, find the link for Oki Mek for the OOD article, and please contribute to his learning process.
Thank you,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Have a
and
good
have a
conference.
fresh. Thank you.